Author death battle. It's back. We're finally back. We're actually doing one of these videos. The last time I did Brandon Sanderson versus Patrick Rothfuss, and the battle was rigorous. However, Patrick Rothfuss was slain. He was killed. He was split into two halves by Brandon Sanderson, okay? And he was literally punched to the atmosphere, to space. And this time, it's actually Brandon Sanderson who survived last time versus NK Jemisin, which is, if you have not known or if you haven't watched this channel before, she is one of my favorite fantasy authors. If I were to put anyone in the top 5, she would be one of them 100%. 100%. And Brandon Sanderson would also be 100% in my top 5 list. So this is going to be a really difficult, a very difficult decision, okay? And so this battle will be rigorous. There will be blood. Prepare yourself, grab something, all right? And let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about the characters, because these two authors have similar characters in the way they function overall, right? Not exactly similar, but the way they function is that, first of all, you have someone that is generally good, okay? Someone that is inherently good in nature. And this particular good person will suffer a lot of tragic events, right? For instance, you know, the Maya in the Broken Earth trilogy of books, well, guess what? She suffers a lot. She's like Fitz chivalry, okay? But Kaladin, he also suffers like Fitz chivalry, and he is a very likable person. You just cannot help but like Kaladin, and the same thing, you cannot help but like the Maya. But you see, both characters, they are good in nature, they are tortured, and you care about them. And both authors do a remarkable job getting you to understand these characters remarkably well. And they also test these characters remarkably well. However, there is one facet that I think NK Jemisin wins with this one. And the reason why that facet is primarily the thematic exploration, the thematic subjects that are explored, and how well those are explored. You see, a lot of the times, plot ends up taking over Brandon Sanderson's characters. Plot and like not Kaladin, but a lot of the other characters in his stories, plot becomes their main thing. They are chasing this MacGuffin, right? But for the first books, in a lot of NK Jemisin's stories, what ends up happening is that the protagonist is defined by the theme that is being explored. An example, the Maya in the 5th season, which is my favorite book from NK Jemisin, like my favorite book. I will talk about this book until the day I die. In this particular story, we have a lot of thematic content that is handled through this particular protagonist, the Maya, and the various stages that she goes through. One of them is grief. She loses a lot of loved ones. Another one is actually discrimination, right? And there is class commentary as well. But the class commentary is not very well defined. However, the commentary on discrimination, that is very much present. And it is it's so beautiful that I often use NK Jemisin as an author to point to, when literary snobs talk shit about the fantasy genre. When they say that the fantasy genre cannot be used to explore literary subjects, I always point to NK Jemisin. I rarely ever point to Brandon Sanderson. Yes, and this is what I'm talking about. This is what I mean. While they both have likable, tortured characters, at the end of the day, NK Jemisin wins because you see, she has likable, tortured characters who are, defined by the thematic content of the story. And this is where she differs greatly from Brandon Sanderson. The only actually major character that is famous for Brandon Sanderson that I can point to that is likable and tortured and also defined by the themes is Kaladin, with the immortal words that he has to speak. And other than that character, nothing else that I can think of off the top of my head. So maybe you can point something down below. But yeah, generally speaking, the characters of NK Jemisin for me are way better than Brandon Sanderson characters, primarily because of how thematically rich NK Jemisin's characters are. Now let's talk about the plot. Which author has the better plot? I honestly do not think this one is a competition, okay? Between these two authors, I think Brandon Sanderson's plots are so good they are so good, sometimes they end up defining the characters. This is a problem in the first category we talked about, okay? But in the second category we're talking about, it is actually a positive because sometimes his plots are so good that everything else shoved to the back. Like, and I am happy with that. I am literally extremely happy with that. And this means I really love Brandon Sanderson's plots way more. Not only are they stop. There is something called the Sanderson avalanche. And the Sanderson avalanche describes how in Brandon Sanderson's stories, the climax of his stories is remarkably beautiful. His plots are so good, they gave his plots and the finale of his books a name. They call it Sanderson avalanche. Okay, this shit is we now have a definition. This guy's plots cannot be competed with. I doubt there is any human on this planet who can, and he will always win. You pick up a Brandon Sanderson book, you can never put it down. Sorry, you messed up. If you had homework to do, assignments, forget about it. If you had a loved one to go to, forget about it. This is now your life. So Sanderson's plots just win every time, all the time. But let's talk about the next thing, which is language. Which one of them uses the English language more beautifully, right? Who has the better prose? And for this one, you remember in the plot, it was not a competition, right? The prose, it's not a competition. Brandon Sanderson doesn't even come close. He doesn't even come close to 1,000 degrees of N.K. Jemisin. She is a master at using prose in order to convey emotions, in order to convey the atmosphere, in order to convey the characters, in order to convey like everything that is happening in a very immaculate way. I'll give you an example. Reading an N.K. Jemisin book feels like you are snuggled in with the characters. But reading a Brandon Sanderson book, even though the plot is amazing, and a lot of it is captivating and spectacle. It's a lot of spectacle with Brandon Sanderson. It feels as if it's like a dry factory. Okay, it feels like dry metal, running your hand against metal. That's what Brandon Sanderson's stories feel like in terms of prose. It's very dry, it's very mechanical, and I don't really like that. He doesn't even compete. Like yeah. So what is the deciding factor? What splits these two authors, one into the winner and the other into the loser? And I have to say the deciding factor for me is the output. Okay, so Brandon Sanderson ties with her when it comes to everything else. However, N.K. Jemisin, even though she is prolific, right? She is prolific, but you see, Brandon is a different kind of prolific. Brandon is so prolific that in half a decade, he publishes more than people publish in their entire life. That's how prolific this man is. He keeps pumping out books that are 400,000, 300,000 words every year. But on top of that, he does not seem to have bad star ratings. He does not seem to lose the narrative. He does not seem to lose the public agreement that his books are amazing. Every book, even though sometimes people will complain about Brandon Sanderson's books with slight nitpicks. And he is making so many of them. So I think at the end of the day, Brandon Sanderson wins for me, primarily because of how not only is he as great as N.K. Jemisin, but he seems to be doing twice and three times and four times more than N.K. Jemisin. So that's really it. Brandon Sanderson wins for me. The death battle, N.K. Jemisin, her head has been chopped off. Tell me what do you think down in the comments below. I hope to hear from you. Which one do you prefer? Brandon Sanderson, N.K. Jemisin. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day. Bye.